looks like we were having some technical difficulty. My mic was muted. Good morning, everyone, and thanks for jumping on and joining this live stream, our Ag Exchange. We have a very good conversation planned this morning as we will be talking with two individuals and discussing the issues of land trust and really looking at what are these, who is responsible for them, what are their intentions, what are their purposes, who do they benefit, and for our purpose, how does it interact with agriculture, and what is agriculture's responsibility? What are the possibilities, and how do they interact with agriculture, as well as kind of looking at what are some of the implications when the state may or may not always use that land appropriately or the way it's supposed to. So we'll get into some more of those details in a minute. But first, I do want to send a quick thank you. The Ag Exchange, this is a monthly live stream where we are recording conversations we're having on a variety of topics. And really, this couldn't be possible without the support of the Kennewick Irrigation District. We really appreciate our sponsor, the Kennewick Irrigation District, for their partnership with Save Family Farming, their willingness to work with us. We really appreciate their leadership and their efforts in particular in the kind of lower central Washington area. But they do phenomenal work as making sure that farms and ranches across that region have sustainable and safe water. And so really appreciate them. Big shout out to the Kennewick Irrigation District. Really appreciate their support and their ongoing sponsorship of our work here. So with that, I am excited to introduce a couple of guests that I want to make you all aware of. I'm going to bring these guys on the screen here in a moment. But first, we have let me see if I can get the screen up here in a second. But we do have former Representative Jim Buck is one of our guests, and he is I had a slide that I wanted to see if I could show, but it's not popping up real quick. But regardless, he was in the House of Representatives with the Washington State House of Representatives, really from the late 90s to mid 2000s, was co-chair of the House Natural Resources Committee, and has been very involved and active in working both with emergency management systems and really overseeing and kind of helping guide some of the public conversation around DNR land trust, and is really a resident expert in this issue. And so really appreciate him and his work and your willingness to come on. In a few moments, we'll bring on another gentleman, Rod Haberly. He is a rancher, longtime rancher in the Omak area, and has a great deal of experience. He's been out there. I was talking with him earlier. Their ranch has been around in the family for over 100 years. Multiple generations have worked this land and raised cattle on this land and run cattle on various leased lands as well. And so he has a very interesting and very specific perspective on more of the agricultural receiving end of farming and ranching. And so we'll bring Rod on in just a moment. But we were having, just for viewers' understanding, we were having a little bit of technical difficulty and this morning. And so we have former Representative Jim Buck. He is on the phone, but we are going to be kind of streaming his voice over here as he is going to be talking to us. So if you see a little lag or hear a little lag, it's due to that. But Jim, Rod, thank you both for being willing to be a part of this conversation. I really, really appreciate it. I think individuals will really hopefully get a lot out of this. But Jim, if I could, I really wanted to kind of start the conversation with you as we're going to be talking through really what is Washington Trust land. What is that? Who is involved with that? Who benefits from it? Who's responsible for it? We have half a dozen kind of questions that go along with that. So I am not a farmer. I am not a rancher. I advocate for both for a living, but my understanding and knowledge is rather limited when it comes to how these land trusts operate. and I have some assumptions and that we'll kind of talk through. And I'd love for you to help maybe correct some of that. So we'll keep the conversation going. But for our viewers, Washington land trusts, they really do affect taxpayers. They affect emergency services. They affect schools, both grade schools as well as higher education, and farmers and ranchers. So this is something that really does affect us all. So with that, Jim, let me turn it over to you first. Kind of give us the lowdown, the basic 101 on Washington land trusts. Let me see. I will add your voice to the stage. I apologize. Let's see if we can make this happen.
That better?
There we go.
There we go. Okay. Well, thanks for inviting me. I hope I can answer some of your questions. The first question that people come up with is, what are trust lands? Mm-hmm. And we have two basic kinds of trust lands that apply to agriculture in Eastern Washington and forestry in Western Washington. The first type is the federal grant land trust, and they were given to the state at statehood, and basically they are to set up capital expenditures for establishing state institution buildings. Okay. No basic education dollars comes out of this trust. And there's 1.5 million acres of it. On our side of the hill, in Western Washington, it's mostly timberland. And of course, on Rod's side of the hill, it's mostly grazing and ag land. And we'll talk a little bit more about what that means later. But the second largest county trust, or county of trust, is what's called state forest lands. It was formed in the 1930s. There's about 600,000 acres. And at the time, 21 counties had foreclosed on timberlands that had been harvested and not replanted. And the state demanded that we give them or deed that land to them so it could be brought back into production. Mm-hmm. And the split on the harvest, or the revenue coming from that land, is 25% goes to DNR and 75% comes back to the county. And by law, it has to be distributed to the schools, counties, libraries, fire districts, the junior task districts in the county. So for our side of the hill, that's a big deal. You on Rod's side of the hill, they didn't have that many trees, so they weren't able to get into the trust. So they don't have any money coming out of it. I mean, I teased Rod about this yesterday. I mean, in Adams County could have put both of the trees in the county into the trust, but it wouldn't have been very good to manage. So that's where they came from and how we got there. Now, the second thing that comes from it is who benefits from the trust. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And the Constitution and some of the environmental people are trying to say that these belong to all the people of the state, and they don't.
Okay.
The Supreme Court has very clearly come out and said that the trust is for the beneficiaries exclusively, and the successful operation of the beneficiaries is what benefits all the people of the state.
Okay.
So,
I think we may have lost some audio here, but this was to that point. Let me see if I can kind of catch myself up a little bit. One of the things that I know I was having some trouble with even earlier on when you and I were kind of working back and forth a little bit, I had in my head, the land belongs to the people of the state of Washington. The land that is put into these trusts, that's the citizens' land, right? And that's not necessarily accurate. That's not necessarily the case. This land belongs to the legislature. Is that correct?
The legislature is the trustee. The land belongs to the trust.
Okay. Okay.
Now you have two ways that this works. Is the state can own it, like it does for the federal grant lands, but it has to hold it in trust exclusively for the beneficiaries named in the Constitution.
Okay.
And that's the only place the money can go. If you have 100,000 acres going for WSU, they don't get to tap into that for UW or any of the other accounts.
Okay. Okay. So kind of help me out. Where did the land come from? Obviously, it's from our state, but where did the land come from that was put into this trust? How are these trusts determined or developed? And again, this is an assumption, so please correct my assumption if I'm wrong. But I'm assuming the legislature put this in. How did the legislature determine what land is going to be put into trust?
Well, the legislature really didn't have anything to do with the federal grant lands.
True. Okay.
When the Enabling Act was put together, it was an offer by the federal government that said, if you adopt a constitution that meets the requirements of the Enabling Act, we will give you this land from the federal government for the exclusive use of what the Constitution says it's supposed to be for.
Okay.
Okay. So
that would be the state constitution, correct? Or is correct?
Pardon?
And that's the state constitution, correct? That the state constitution determines how the land will be used for the state?
Yes. So if people want to go ahead and change that they get to do a
I think we lost the audio again. So I think we may have to adapt here a little bit. I do apologize. Looks like we may have to swing this a little differently. We will come back. Let me see if we're losing some of the audio for Representative Buck on the back end. We were trying to do a workaround, but it's not. We will see if we can make this work out, and we'll give it another shot. And
I'm good here.
There we go. Now we can hear you. The audio was blinking out. So I apologize. So we'll try this once or twice more. But if it keeps happening, we may have to adapt a little bit. But so yes. So the land was determined by the state constitution. What land would be assigned to the trust, and then how is the land to be used? It has a variety of beneficiaries.
Well, each beneficiary has a specific set of acreage. So, they can lease, sell. They can actually sell the land, or lease and sell to the highest bidder.
Okay.
The products off the land, and that's where the income comes from.
Okay.
If you have west side land going to common schools, you harvest the timber. If you have east side land that's in grazing or agriculture, then the lease or proceedings, revenue from those lands also go to common schools.
Okay. So those are the beneficiaries, and if I'm understanding correctly, and it may be dependent obviously on the type of trust or which of basically the three types of land trusts that they're there. But does emergency services also plays into that, or is a beneficiary to some degree? Is that correct, or is that an incorrect?
Okay, this comes from a separate trust.
Okay.
Okay, the federal grant land trusts are specifically for state institutions.
Okay.
Now, the other trust, the 600,000 acre trust, is pretty exclusively on our side of the hill. Uh, that is the one where 25% of the revenue goes to DNR, and the rest of it gets split up among the taxing districts of the counties that deeded the land. So this is the only place where you have some education money or some money coming from a trust to basic education at the school district level. So the thing that's most important to understand about this is trust money does not come from basic education dollars.
Okay.
So when you have politicians in Olympia claiming that the trusts are not meeting the needs of school districts, they never were intended to meet the school of.
Yeah.
So, okay. So who's your beneficiaries? Federal grant lands or common schools, universities, WSU, UW, Eastern Washington, and the university colleges,
Okay.
Capitol buildings, and CPRI. You get to the county, and it's the land that was deeded to the school or the county.
Okay.
So you have county services, schools, EMS. That's where your emergency management comes from.
Okay.
Libraries, ports, and recreation districts. And the taxpayers benefit from those organizations working successfully.
Okay. So there's, if I'm understanding, there's three different trusts, correct?
Yes, there's a minor 78,000 acre trust that is basically a state tree farm.
Okay.
The state purchased the land. They own it outright. It's a statutory trust.
Yeah.
And at this time, 50% goes to the general fund and 50% goes to the school districts in the county where the timber is harvested.
Okay.
We're only talking a couple of $1 million a year off of these acreage.
Okay. So now, where does DNR come in? So talk to me about the Department of Natural Resources. Where do they come in? What is their role in at least some, if not all, of these trusts?
Well, they're the trust administrators and managers.
Okay.
Basically, they're the hired hand.
Okay.
They like to think they're a trustee, but the court decisions have all said conclusively that the legislature is the trustee,
okay,
and DNR is the designated trust administrator. So DNR's duties are unambiguous and unavoidable. And in the Skamania case, the Washington Supreme Court confirmed that DNR must act prudently and with an undivided loyalty to the trust beneficiaries to the exclusion of all other interests, no matter how audible.
Mm-hmm.
So when people are coming in and talking about, we want to preserve these trees, or we want this particular piece of land set aside because we like it, that's an excluded other interest, and it's not supposed to be considered. So the legislature's the trustee of the federal grant lands and the county transfer lands. So, we've gone ahead and looked at the common law trust doctrine forbids DNR from exceeding authority granted by the legislature, but DNR routinely exceeds legislative authority, and legislative inaction is a tacit approval of DNR's actions, and this is a breach of common law trust doctrine. So you had a question in here about what's the difference between owning land and stewarding land.
Mm-hmm.
That's not an easy question, but basically the owner of owned land uses it for anything lawfully desired, anything he wants to. The owner or trustee of trust land can only use it for the purposes defined in the instrument of the trust.
Okay. So basically, we're kind of parsing out or separating the Department of Natural Resources. They don't own the land. They are not the trustee of this land. They are not. They don't. Yeah. Anyway, they don't own that land. But the legislature has tasked them or given them that responsibility as the administrator. They are the administrator over this land, and it's their job to work for the betterment and the best interests of the owner and the beneficiaries. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, what you're alluding to, and not even implying, it's fairly direct, but we have seen numerous times where it seems the DNR is maybe assuming, or kind of pushing the envelope, or assuming that they have some sort of trustee or ownership of this land. How have you seen that? How has that played out? Or where, maybe can you give an example or two of where you've seen DNR kind of pushing the envelope on kind of stretching their role as an administrator?
Let's go to the legislature before we get into the DNR.
Okay, that's fair.
Okay, because I think there's an important concept that we need to look at here.
Okay.
The legislature is supposed to give direction to DNR, and DNR is supposed to carry it out.
Sure.
So some of the confusing direction that you get is, if you are supposed to be handling the trust exclusively for the beneficiaries, in 1971, the legislature just kind of off the top of their head decided that we were going to change the administration fee from 10% to 25%.
Okay.
Okay. Well, not really, but okay. In 1971, they also decided that we would go ahead and use trust lands for multiple use, but made no provision for providing the trust with reimbursement for the, for the leases on campgrounds, hatcheries, trails, and stuff like that. Plus, when they did that, they introduced a third party interest into the beneficiaries, which is supposed to be excluded. So you get to 1987, and all of a sudden we have an agreement where we're going to go ahead and let DNR make a 50-year agreement without approval of the trustee. That would be the first HCP.
Okay, what's an ACP?
Habitat Conservation Plan.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so in 2023, you get more legislation coming down, and this is one of the things that's really beginning to have an impact on your agriculture people, is legislature puts in a program where non-beneficiaries can start to weigh in and direct trust land transfer decisions.
Oh, okay.
Suddenly you have people who are not part of the trust or beneficiaries of the trust legislatively allowed to go ahead and say, hey, I think this piece of property that's next door is pretty nice. I like it because it's got trees on it. I really don't want them cut down. So I think it should be trust land transferred and turned into a natural area preserve.
Okay.
This to me is a complete disconnect between the trust and the trustee.
Now, why? Can you explain that? Why
we're back to the concept of an undivided loyalty to the beneficiaries.
There you go.
Okay, so if you're going to go ahead and say, okay, because you don't want those trees next door cut, you are obviously showing a divided loyalty to the beneficiaries by taking into account the concerns or wishes of somebody that's not related to this issue at all.
Sure.
So you asked your segment 5 question was pretty much how do I view recent positions taken by DNR, OSPI, and ecology regarding trust lands? And we'll go back to the legislature has the ultimate legal and fiduciary responsibility for handling the trusts. And they must be managed prudently with an undivided loyalty to the trust beneficiaries, again, to the exclusion of all other interests. Their legislature can delegate some responsibility for management and administration of trust, but it cannot ignore its ultimate responsibility to the beneficiaries.
Right.
So you asked about DNR, OSPI, and ecology. Commissioner Updegrove ignores his assigned legal and fiduciary duties to the legislature and the beneficiaries. And this places DNR in danger of running out of money.
Okay.
Which makes it hard to manage things. That hurts the timber counties by interfering with the harvest on our trust lands. It hurts the ag and timber counties by introducing third-party excluded other interests into the trust land and transfer of businesses.
Yeah.
So OSPI Superintendent Reichdahl uses his position on the Board of Natural Resources to pursue his personal environmental agenda.
Yeah.
The legislature delegated BNR the job of ensuring sales of trust assets meet constitutional requirements of Article 16 of our Constitution and conform with state and federal law. I can't find any legislation permitting him to vote against a timber sale that meets those legal requirements.
Yeah, so you're talking about his recent comments that, in essence, support removing 70+ thousand of acres of timber. Right. Here is the superintendent of OSPI, in essence, working against the beneficiaries to remove this, which would in turn then remove those dollars coming to Washington schools. And so he is not working for the betterment of the beneficiary in that regard.
That's right.
Surprisingly, he's working even to the detriment of the agency and the schools that he is, been elected to lead. So it's very much a split loyalty there.
I agree.
So
ecology is exceeding its authority on the buffer rule that removes 220,000 acres of private timberland from production. And of course, it's exceeding its authority on issues like the King Ranch water debacle and whatnot. So, the common denominator on each of these issues is the lack of legislative oversight. And while the 220,000 acre private timberland thing is not a trust issue, it is an industry issue that will affect both of the trusts. And this is a breach of trust that will probably not be addressed without prevention.
Okay. Well, let me. This is a good segue. I'd love to pull Rod into the conversation a little bit, because now you're talking about things like, one, yes, we've talked about DNR, talking about OSPI and their engagement and involvement, but you mentioned ecology. Obviously, Rod, you have been a rancher in the OMAC area for yourself decades, but even your family for generations. But I also know you have run cattle, cow-calf runs on leased land for years. I'd love to kind of hear a little bit. One, maybe kind of first, how have you used leased land in the past? And I'd love to kind of hear a little bit about your engagement. What have those years of experience looked like for you? How have you utilized leased land?
Well, in specific, we have U.S. Forest Service leased land, Bureau of Land Management leased land, DNR lease land and private lease land, but we're talking about DNR lease land today, which we have had for about 50 or 60 years. And my understanding when we first were approached about involving this today, my understanding was part of our leased land for grazing was a school section. Section 16 and 36 were designated, my understanding years ago, to raise money for schools. And this one section we had was a section 36, and we always still do today refer to it as a school section. And since then, we have added 4 or 5 other DNR leases up in the Concanelli area, comprising probably of about 3,000 acres in total. And they are all exclusively for grazing. They have all had timber harvest done on them previous to us getting a couple of them, but they are typically what Jim's been describing here. They are leased lands in eastern Washington for grazing, and timber has been harvested off of them. So that's Haverty Ranch's involvement in DNR leased land.
Yes, yes. Now, what has been the process for your ranch to utilize leased land? Maybe kind of walk me through that for someone who doesn't have a good, never really interacted with leased land. What does a farmer or a rancher have to do to engage in your case, run cattle on leased land? What is that process?
So in our operation, we use leased lands that I just mentioned of all those different types. We use them for a summer grazing pasture.
Okay.
And in the fall, when those leases, which are defined in length, usually from around June 1st to maybe November 1st is the duration of them. When we come and move out of those, then we come back home and utilize our private pastures. And then at the end of that, when the snow gets deep, we rely on our hay resources that we put up all summer long. So that's kind of how the feed part of that works. And on our DNR leased lands, we are responsible for 100% of the fencing supplies, fencing construction. We get taxed as a weed control on those lands that we lease from the DNR, and we are responsible for doing the weed control. I have a little issue with that part of the deal, because if those lands are open to the public's accessibility with roads going through them, I think the recreational people should be participating in part of this issue too, because it is a big and significant issue. Weed control is a big dollar deal. It's a minor thing. And if you don't do some degree of weed control, even though I'm saying something controversial to the environmental community, if you don't do weed control, you are not going to have any pasture worth putting a cow on. It's going to become a thistle patch and a weed patch.
Yeah.
So that is a big deal. Timber harvest on those DNR lands that we lease have been a good thing in that and the state is pretty darn good about doing timber harvests over in my area. They try and thin the trees out. They try and keep them to a productive growth distance from each other because of moisture and nutrients. And I don't have no issue with their timber management, other than what Jim just brought out. They're trying more and more all the time. They're trying to set aside DNR lands from ever being harvested for timber, which I agree with Jim. It is totally against the intended use of those DNR lands from their origin.
Yeah. Yes. Okay.
The other issue that comes up around my table through the years is there have been organizations that have tried to lease these DNR grazing leases that we have and not had a cow, which is required. And they've wanted to lease them basically for intended hunting programs. And thank God at one time when several of those were utilized to try and create hunting lodges or whatever, the DNR stood right up and said, you have to have a cow, you have to have livestock on those to be even eligible to lease them. And even if you have livestock, you have to have home based property to justify the full term year care of livestock, or you're still not eligible to lease those lease lands. So with all the attempts to convert those, as Jim was referring to, into something they were never intended for from the start, these lands were never intended to sit idle.
Yeah.
And there's organizations all the time that keep trying to stop the timber from being harvested and sit idle, or lease them for hunting and idle. But that needs to be reconciled, I think, more closely than it is.
Well, let me pull in. I want to pull back Jim here, and with that, Rod, you brought up a really interesting point that, Jim, you might be able to shine some light on. With that, if land goes away, or land is being removed, or is not in production, is not having cattle operate on it, is just it's vacant land. What are the ramifications? What are the results of that? What would be, the end result is land goes away, or even it's just pulled out of production. What are some of the results that might happen for both the state, the beneficiaries, et cetera?
Well, first thing that happens is WSU doesn't get any money.
Okay.
Or UW or whoever else.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's a problem right there. But one of the things we're running into over here is if you don't cut the trees, DNR doesn't get its 25% for the management fee.
Well, I think we maybe have lost a little bit of the audio. I think we'll have to. It'll come back here in just a second. Sorry, Jim. Sorry. While we wait, like I said, we were having a bit of a wraparound or run around for some of the audio here, so we'll wait for that to come out. I'll come right back to you, Jim, in a second. But talk about forest management, because you mentioned that. I did want to ask real quickly. Rod, you have had a lot of experience with unmanaged forests, and I know right now you were, even before this call, we were talking. You were talking a little bit about the impact of the fires to your area. When forests are not managed, when there is that kind of administration is cut back, what, from your experience, what are some of the results that you've seen when forests are not managed correctly? What are the potential impact?
Well, there's a slogan that came out that I'm going to lead off on this one with that I think is totally true. It came from within my industry. It said, log it, graze it, or watch it burn. And that's just exactly what we've been doing since 2015 in a big way.
Really?
2015 marked a year from 1975 spotted owl, no logging anymore. Can't do that because of the spotted owl endangered. So in 2015, we lost 1 million acres over here on the eastern part of Washington to fires. We burned up our timber industry's most precious ground, and our grazing and our wildlife. And right now, we've got enough fire going on within a 100-mile radius of where I am sitting right now to say that we probably are destroying another 50% of the acreage in this area available for grazing right now.
Yes.
Right now. People are removing cattle from these permits right now as we speak. And these fires right now are the result kind of a whole new management level in fighting fire, which back in my day of 50 years with a bulldozer on fires, we used to call hotline logging, where you put your blade down not very far from the fire line and moved all the burnable debris out away from, so when the fire burned into the ground, it quit. Today we fight fire from a contingency line, Now, I'm not saying everybody does this, but it's done pretty regularly. Contingency line is a line that is well away from the hot of the fire, and it lets the fire burn to the contingency line. And then oftentimes they backfire. There's a lot of problems that come out of that with fires getting away, which is what we're watching all away. And the winds, they put their lives on the line. There's no doubt about it. The winds are terrible, terrible. And then when you don't actually get in on the fire and remove debris from it, it's going to keep burning. All these years of not managing our forest, not logging, thinning, and picking out the debris and burning it in slash piles have resulted in just exactly what we're seeing right now, and we'll continue to see until that management changes.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Jim, I think we may have you back. You were hearing what Rod was saying about the impacts that fires are having. I'm assuming that probably lines in with some of what you were sharing a minute ago. From your perspective, I'd love for you to kind of help maybe finish that thought. As we're removing land, what's the threat to the state?
Well, I mean, ultimately, the taxpayers are going to have to pay more. And it's going to impact the economy on our side. We got $1 million timber sale up over here. The ultimate total impact to the community of this sale through multiplier effects and additional jobs, indirect jobs, and the rest of it is almost $12 million.
Wow.
So when I can't speak to how that works with you on your leased agricultural land or your grazing land, but I can tell you that money goes directly to state institutions.
Yeah.
But the jobs and the spin-off benefits that go to your towns and your businesses and the rest of the people in your area are probably at least or much more important to your way of life.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I wanted to do I know, Rod, you also had some maybe questions from your perspective. Is there anything that you had questions on, or areas that you would like to have maybe Jim explain a little bit when it comes to how leased land operates? You've used it for decades, I know. But there's still a lot of question marks out there. So anyway, I'd love to draw you in on the conversation and hear some of your thoughts on, what are some of the things that we need answers on when it comes to how this land is operated, administrated, leased, etc.
I guess my biggest concern and thing on my mind with all of what we're talking about today is to see the management of these lands get back in line for what they originally were intended, which is not to be set aside, not to be underproduced or not produced at all. They were intended not to sit idle. They were intended to be grazed, logged, and managed. And we have gotten quite a ways away from that in a lot of respects today on these lands. Jim has a whole lot more light on that one than I do, but that's what I see here. We've got parcels of DNR land now that are sitting idle.
I agree. I don't see a political solution to this in Olympia because basically the legislature is controlled by people who don't want us to use the land. So the only out that I see is for us to go ahead and go after the legislature for not administering the trust properly. And I think there's huge numbers of issues that could be brought up to sue the legislature over breach of trust.
Okay.
Now, it would be difficult to sue DNR because they're basically the hired hands.
Right.
And They're not being supervised properly. And because of the way the courts interpret some of the laws, they can get away with almost anything because they get a broad brush of discretion as long as they're not doing something illegal.
Sure.
And, from my standpoint, I think there's quite a possibility of seeing some illegality in what's going on with some of the other things.
Yeah. So it sounds like, and this is honest, now you're speaking my language when you start talking about, holding agencies or organizations accountable. It sounds like a lot of this, kind of the, you give a mouse a cookie, it's going to continue to, kind of stretch the arm, ask for more. It's going to need that glass of milk. It's going to want more and more and more until you're giving it your left arm. And it's costing, like you said, ultimately the individuals that are going to be paying for this, both, figuratively and literally, are the taxpayers in a variety of ways. It's in our best interest to ensure that the legislature is holding the agencies accountable, that they're utilizing and managing these trusts appropriately. It sounds like the legislature, from your perspective, Jim, is who's really kind of on the hook. I completely agree. DNR, even some of these, OSPI or ecology, others that are using and administrating and abusing some of their role, but really it's the accountable, that they're responsible for how these lands are managed. And how would you mentioned there's a slew of areas where at this case to be made? Could you identify maybe a couple areas where you're seeing these breach trust agreements?
Well, common law requires that a beneficiary can request a copy of the trust instrument and an address of how it can contact the trustee. And we have not been able to get that from the state since March. So that's a breach of trust right there. Is we don't want to talk to the hired hand anymore. We want to talk to the boss. We want to talk to the guy that demanded that we turn 93,000 acres over to them so that they could put it back into production and share the money with us. And it's not happening. So that's the first one right off the bat. The second one is the multiple use thing specifically says that you can do multiple use for hunting, fishing, gathering, camping, stuff like that. But it specifically says if the multiple use is not compatible with the way the trust is supposed to be administered, they either can't do it or the trust has to be paid for in a lease, or it has to provide revenue to the trust. That's not happening.
Yeah.
And in fact, it's gotten to the point of where in the last legislative session, they refused, or the legislature refused to fund DNR campgrounds here in Clallam County. So what we have is a directive that we're going to have multiple use, but we're not going to pay for it.
Yeah. So, Rod, we got a handful of minutes left, but from your perspective, what's at stake if these land trusts are depleted? Or, I don't know that they're going away, but like we've talked about, we have the administrators of the trust are looking at selling off, large swaths of land. From your perspective as a rancher, what's at stake if these trusts, these land trusts, the ability to lease land from these trusts is depleted?
I'll just answer that with a little bit of background leading up to it. In 1985, when I was cattlemen's president for Okanogan County, Okanogan County had about 70,000 head of mother cows and calves, beef cattle. Fast forward through the spotted owl dilemma, a lot of these lands being set aside without grazing on them. and all of the things that Jim has talked about today. Today we have about 10 to 12,000 head of beef cattle left in Okanagan County. If these lands keep sitting idle, if the environmental community keeps wanting more recreational ground and playground and no livestock on them, livestock defined as sheep or cattle, the food supply for the nation will keep reducing and keep reducing and keep reducing. That's what I just said is a nationwide issue, guys. It's not just Okanagan County. Since 1980, the cattle beef herd in the United States of America is less than half of what it today is less than half of what it was in 1980.
Wow, I did not know that.
It's decreasing. We're losing 2 farms a day here in Washington State. So food for the nation, I think, should be first priority, because you can live without $1 million home. You can live without $1 million motor home. You can live without a lot of material things, but you cannot live without food. And we are importing 40 to 50% of our total food in this nation today, and it's getting more that way all the time.
Yes.
And other studies have shown that the American people may be spoiled about food, waste about 40% of the food they eat.
Right.
So those are facts, guys. That's not Rod's idea. Those are facts.
Yep, you are not the first that I've heard from that. I know a couple of years ago was the first year that we were a net importer of food versus, in the past we were always exporting more. That is not the reality we live in now. We are now more dependent than ever on other people to feed us, because we're putting policy and restrictions and limitations in place where we can't take care of ourselves. So, well, I'd love to, Jim, you kind of mentioned a little bit, but a couple minutes left. What can individuals like myself, Rod, what can we be doing to maybe help encourage a change here? What can we be doing from our perspective? Or is it just wring our hands and pray the legislature does a thing?
No, I think it's an education process, and your podcast this morning is a great step in being able to go ahead and explain to people something that's basically thought of as unexplainable.
Yeah.
Is, when you helped me out and I helped you out with your handout last week, the amount of information that we traded back and forth has got to get out to the public, because what you said originally was just pretty much what everybody thinks, and it's not the case.
Right.
So I think it's important for the agriculture community to understand that they're not alone being under this attack.
Yeah.
And so far we've had an issue that I've been working with the last 2 years is there's just too many silos.
Yeah.
There's too many worried about well, we're a private timber company, or we don't do trust land stuff, or we're agriculture, we don't care about trees, or vice versa. And when it all comes down to the end, if we don't get this thing straightened out, we're all going to be going. Yeah. So I think it's time for everybody to sit back, take a breath, and find a way to come up with an alliance that protects these trusts and our trust lands.
Yes.
That will spin off over into the private lands. So this is an existential problem.
Yes.
It's a matter of,
before I go ahead, Rod.
It's a matter of priorities, in my opinion. My grandfather said back in 1967, when I was a senior in high school, I think we're going to see more and more restrictions and hardships in trying to keep producing in agriculture. And I think that will continue until the day comes when people can't find something to stuff in their mouth. And then it will change overnight.
Yeah.
I agree with that. I've watched that my whole life. I agree with that statement. It's coming, boys. If we don't wake up, it's coming.
Yeah. No, you're not. I'm not convinced you're wrong. Well, with the last about 60 seconds or so, I'd love to kind of ask, is there anything from your, yes, I really appreciate both of you sharing the need for education. Sounds like, at least from kind of the general consumer's perspective, that's really what we need to be about doing. And, using tools like this, hearing from you both, are ways to educate. But I'd love to give you, a 15, 30-second closing. Any last minute thought that you would kind of leave individuals watching this, primarily individuals that, may or may not be aware of what goes into, leased lands and how they operate and how they benefit the state in a variety of institutions and ways. But what would you encourage or kind of leave? Jim, I'll start with you, and then I'll go to Rod. But what would you share?
The first thing I would encourage is everybody is to watch this podcast as many times as you can. And, this is the seed that would begin to let agriculture know they're not alone when they're struggling with the trust issues, and the state agencies. But second, I'd really like to thank you for putting Rod and me together. We had a great time talking yesterday, and we've come to the conclusion that it's probably a really good thing we live as far away from each other as we do.
Us in between would get in the crossfire. Y'all could make a ruckus. No, that's good. That is good. And to you, thank you for your work and leadership on this for the past decades, really. And so it's very much appreciated. Rod, let me turn it over to you.
Okay, I'm just going to say this, and these aren't my original words. I'm just reading them. These lands were never intended to sit idle. They were intended to produce sustainable revenue through responsible management. That's what Jim's been hitting on. Mm-hmm. From my perspective of my life, my family's life in agriculture, producing the best food in the world in beef, and this is a fact too, in my community, one working ranch supports an entire rural community. When Jim and I were talking in private yesterday, he brought up several examples of that in his community. I know in my community, the agricultural community of used to harvesting timber, used to have a sawmill, used to have 70,000 beef cattle, used to be that all supported Main Street business people, nearly 100%. Today, that's not true anymore. Education, that's your job, Ben. Education.
Well, it is something that Save Family Farming does. We work really hard to do, but it is something that we all have that responsibility and that level of responsibility. The temptation is to make assumptions, and I tend to easily can fill in the gaps. When I don't know something, I can assume, and I fill in the gaps with the narratives that I may be able to pull out. And those aren't always reality. And so it's up to me, it's up to each of us to learn more and make sure that, what we're understanding is accurate and true, and that there's a lot at stake when we get it wrong. In particular, when we're limiting our ability to take care of ourselves, when we're limiting our access to fund the services and resources that we're all dependent on, when we're looking at a future where education or emergency services or food production are threatened. Those are things we need to take very seriously and not mess around with. And also hold leaders accountable to make sure that they're working in the best interest of, again, those beneficiaries that we all rely on. With that, guys, I will say I will kind of wrap it up here, but thank you both. Thank you for your work. Jim, thank you for your leadership in the House and the legislature and working diligently on this issue. Rod, thank you for your years and years of working the ranch and feeding us all. It is deeply appreciated. Thank you for your work. I will say just real quick as we close and wrap up, I do want to, again, thank our sponsor, the Kennewick Irrigation District, for their support and their work. And I will have a big thank you to them. I do want to encourage individuals, if you are not tapped into Save Family Farming and some of the work that we're doing, you can visit our website at www.savefamilyfarming.org. If you have any questions about some of the information that we were sharing, or you have any questions about the work of these land trusts, or really anything that we're putting out, feel free to reach out to us. You can contact us at info@savefamilyfarming.org. Obviously, that we'll send an email. We'd love to be in touch with you and contact with you. Also, if you do not receive our email updates on our monthly newsletter, you can sign up. There's a QR code there. You can scan and sign up for that monthly newsletter and some additional kind of ad hoc information that we'll send out. You can also access that on our website, again, www.savefamilyfarming.org. And we would love to be in touch with you. But with that, we will call this a wrap. Again, thank you to Rod. Thank you to Jim. Really appreciate their work and their service, and for taking some time and visiting with us this morning. And again, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. Thanks, everyone. And we'll look forward to chatting more soon.